Welcome to McDougall. On this show, are the pills you give your kids dangerous? Our guest is Dr. Jay Gordon. Hello, I'm Wayne Judd. And now the heavyweight of good health, Dr. John.
Let's do a heavyweight discussion, okay?
I'll take a heavyweight discussion.
When you were growing up, if I had the opportunity to ask you what was the most important of the basic four food groups?
Probably milk.
Milk. That was the healthiest one, right?
That's right.
You know, a mother's milk, what could be harmful, even though it was a cow mother we're talking about.
In fact, I think I told you once, John, that we milked our cows by hand and drank raw milk all the time I lived at home on the farm in Minnesota. I drank raw milk right from the cow. Warm and delicious, wonderful stuff.
That is really scary.
Scary.
And I'll tell you why. You know, first of all, the American consumer has decided that whole milk products are hazardous, and so they've taken the fat out of the milk because they've heard about breast cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer being related to all that fat,
right.
Heart disease, strokes, becoming obese, the real heavyweight.
So it's safe
all that
now.
Fat. Yeah, so now they've taken the fat out. Now they think they have health food because they're consuming low-fat or non-fat dairy products.
Right.
But there are some serious health hazards associated with low-fat, non-fat dairy products.
Even without the fat?
Yeah, you take the fat out, what you do is you increase the relative amount of dairy protein and also dairy sugar, cow's milk sugar, which is known as lactose.
Wait a minute, explain that. What do they do?
Well, when you take the fat out,
right.
There are two components left that give calories, so the relative amounts of those have to go up. See?
Okay.
All right. So we're dealing with dairy protein and also milk sugar as far as health problems. The milk sugar is known as lactose. You may have heard of lactose intolerance.
Yes, I have.
That's where people get stomach cramps and gas when they drink milk.
And some infants can't drink milk.
Well, mostly as you get past the age of 4. The enzyme
Okay.
to digest the milk sugar disappears, and so you get these digestive disturbances.
Okay.
But the milk protein is the biggest problem that people run into, and has lots and lots of serious health hazards. For example, the milk protein is the #1 cause of food allergy. If your child has ear infections, asthma, bedwetting problems, eczema, and they go to a wise pediatrician or allergist, the first thing they'll say is get the kid off the cow's milk, because it's the dairy protein that causes these reactions. Cow's milk causes anemia, and it's well recognized it causes anemia in young children. As a matter of fact, the American Academy of Pediatrics has an official policy that you do not feed cow's milk to children under the age of 1. Now, when they came out with this statement, I had the representative on my radio show, and we talked about how milk causes anemia in children. It does it in 3 ways. One, milk is deficient in iron. Second thing is the calcium and phosphorus in milk, complex iron from other sources like green beans and beef, and prevent its absorption. And the milk causes bleeding in the young child's intestinal tract.
Now, this is an amazing speech, given the fact that everybody needs milk, right?
Well, that's what they keep teaching us.
I'm amazed to hear you make this long, extended speech against milk. I mean, that's like apple pie and motherhood, John.
That's for sure.
So that it's healthy after that.
Yeah, she couldn't tell me. Cow's milk causes even more severe allergic reactions in people besides the runny nose and the bedwetting problems and asthma. Some of the allergic reactions cause the body to actually attack itself. And one of the important diseases here that the literature is overwhelming in its evidence condemning cow's milk is the diseased childhood diabetes, type 1 diabetes, where the child's pancreas is destroyed.
By milk?
By milk, by consuming milk in young children.
Why haven't we heard this?
Well, you have. As a matter of fact, it has hit the newspaper. It just hits the newspaper, the evening news, and then it's buried by all the advertisements from the dairy industry. But what the evidence is worldwide, what you find is a nearly 1-to-1 correlation between cow's milk consumption and this childhood type diabetes. But probably the most convincing evidence came out in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1992, where they looked at 150 children who had childhood diabetes. And what they found is that all these kids had very high levels of antibodies directed towards milk protein. One specific milk protein, and actually one small segment of that protein that contains 17 amino acids. Now, the unfortunate thing is those same 17 amino acids are not only represented on the cow's milk, but also on the child's pancreas. So what happens in susceptible children, because of genetics or or other damage to their intestinal tract, this cow's milk leaks through their intestine into their bloodstream, and the body interprets that cow's milk as a foreign substance, like a virus or a bacteria.
It's amazing.
So it makes antibodies to the milk, but they're not specific just to the milk. They're also specific to they also attack the pancreas, and so glassful after glassful of milk over a 5 to 7 year period of time, the child destroys his or her pancreas. It's a tragedy.
That's heavy-duty stuff.
Well, I've got lots of other things to tell you about cow's milk, especially drinking it raw. And we have Dr. Jay Gordon coming up, a good friend of mine and a well-respected pediatrician, has lots of important things to say about taking care of kids. We'll be right back.
I Learn English, you can also on Hello Channel.
And welcome back. With us, Dr. Jay Gordon, pediatrician, a good friend of mine, and author of a book called Good Food Today, Great Kids Tomorrow. All about how to feed kids properly. And as far as I've seen, the first book that I would agree with as far as how to feed your kids properly.
Thank you.
Congratulations
Thank you very much
on writing it.
Thank you.
As a practicing pediatrician, you must run into parents who demand to have their kids put on antibiotics for this and that. And they feel that they wasted their money and their visit to see Dr. Jay Gordon if you don't give antibiotics, because that's what they've come to expect.
I have a very nice group of parents in my practice, and most of them don't demand antibiotics, but some do. By the way, you spoke for quite a while about cow's milk. You didn't even mention the antibiotics in cow's milk.
There are antibiotics.
Another issue altogether. I don't want to get you started again.
No, you get me started on
cow's
milk.
Well, the dairy people are
show.
liable to come out after us.
Well,
so.
we've had them on the show before, and
But I think there's some questions we need to deal with one of these days on that. I'd like to talk more about that. Maybe
Later.
not tonight.
how do you decide when a child comes in? I mean, here you've got a crying kid.
Mm-hmm.
The mother's upset. She's worried about her child. You look in the ears, and you find maybe a little redness. How do you decide this is the time to put the kid on an antibiotic or not?
Well, you know, my feeling is that the parents know their children better than I do. And if they come in and they tell me what's wrong with the child and how he or she has been acting the night before and all day, I have to listen really closely. For the most part, kids don't need antibiotics. Firstly, most of the illnesses that children get are viral illnesses. Secondly, the immune system works, and it works well. And if given a chance, it will beat almost all ear infections. Given a chance, it'll beat sore throats. Given a chance, it'll beat most childhood illnesses. I use antibiotics probably a little more often than I should when I'm a little bit hurried. Mm-hmm. Okay, if somebody's got a trip to Hawaii on Saturday, they come in to see me on Wednesday, child's got a right ear infection, and they want to know what might get the child better a little quicker, I'll use antibiotics. I don't think that they're terribly dangerous. The overuse of antibiotics has resulted in a lot of problems.
And this happens in a lot of pediatricians' office. I mean, the standard practice, I don't mean just pediatricians, but standard practice for many doctors, general care doctors, is patient walks in, before you say hello, you pick up the prescription pad and you start to write. Because that's the way medicine has developed over the years. And patients expect it. They didn't get their money's worth unless they got a pill out of the doctor.
It's also a lot easier to get the patients out of the office quickly if I write that prescription.
You can move them quickly.
I can see a lot more people if I give them antibiotics compared to explaining to them why they don't need antibiotics.
Right.
Jay, what is the danger? What are some of the dangers of giving too many antibiotics to kids?
Well, firstly, there are routine side effects. Kids get rashes. Little babies get diaper rashes. Okay.
From the antibiotics.
From the antibiotics, because you change the makeup of the bacteria on the skin. Suddenly, the yeast have an awful lot of room to grow. Women all know that when they take antibiotics, they've got a real good chance of getting a vaginal yeast infection. In addition to the routine rashes, there's diarrhea. And then there's some pretty vicious side effects. Occasionally, children get life-threatening damage to the intestinal tract. They get an antibiotic-induced colitis. And then you breed resistant organisms. There are certain areas of the body, the sinuses, that don't get a great blood supply and they don't get a high antibiotic level. So you kill off some of the easy bacteria, and the more difficult bacteria regrow, now resistant to that antibiotic.
They're tougher.
Much tougher, and it reaches a point where you can't kill them, and you get long-term chronic infections and occasionally life-threatening infections. In hospitals right now, there's a fair percentage, still small, but a fair percentage of bacteria that are resistant to all except one of the hundreds of antibiotics that we use. And there's a smaller percentage that look like they're getting resistant to all antibiotics.
And this, in part, is due to the fact that they've had so much exposure to
Yes.
antibiotics through indiscriminate use of antibiotics, or let's just say excessive use when maybe something else could have been done, such as watchful waiting or, talking to the patient instead of reaching for the prescription pad.
Patience. I mean, doctors and parents in general should have patience. The immune system will beat these infections. You watch your child closely. You make sure they're well hydrated, give extra vitamin C, alternative remedies if you believe in them, and kids get better.
But don't you find the decisions tough sometimes? I mean, you have this crying child, and there's some borderline symptoms, and I would think sometimes it's a lot easier to err on the side of saying, well, I'll give the antibiotic because at least the parents can't complain I didn't do everything for the child. And if things do go bad and you end up on the wrong side of the law in the sense of a malpractice suit, I mean, you're much more likely to be faulted if you withheld treatment than you gave them the kitchen sink. And then, what can anybody say? I gave them everything available, even if it killed them.
Right. The trouble is that at a certain point in a doctor's career, I guess you do that. But then after that certain point, after you've seen enough kids with hives or life-threatening allergic reactions, or again, resistant infections, you back off a little bit. I'll tell you that there are a fair number of very conventional doctors who are holding off on antibiotics. And the reason is that we know that the side effects are occasionally terrible and that the infections get better.
And you also have to get the patient informed about this so they will stop demanding the antibiotics. What are some of the things that you would do for a child who, say, had an ear infection or a redness of the ear or pain in the ear, besides reaching for pill-type antibiotics?
Well, I happen to believe that there's a lot of benefit to using vitamin C in higher doses. I believe that some of the herbal remedies work. I've seen echinacea work. Echinacea is recognized in every country but America as mainstream medicine.
What is that?
Echinacea is an herb. It grows wild, and the extract of that herb has been studied by everybody from the major university centers to the National Cancer Institute. It boosts immune system function. It makes the white cells work faster, work better, and it hastens the departure of the illness. So I use vitamin C, I use echinacea.
How about eardrops? How about the time honor, just put a few eardrops in to soothe the ear?
Stop the pain. If you stop the pain, that gives the parents a lot of reassurance.
Sure.
What I tell parents is that very often it is either the pain or the fever that makes the child look so ill. If you can stop the pain and the fever, you can back away and see that this is not that sick a child. It was just a child with a good-sized fever.
Well, part of the important education has to be able to get to the parent to the point where they feel comfortable that the child's going to be okay, and also to the point where they recognize when this is really something serious. And when we get back, what I want you to do is give us some ideas, some hints, so that we can help be better parents and distinguish between the kids that are going to do fine without going to the doctor and the kids that really need help. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Looking for a brighter future? Learn English and make it happen on Hello Channel.
And welcome back. With me is Dr. Jay Gordon, pediatrician. His book, Good Food Today, Great Kids Tomorrow. Great name for a book, and
Thank you.
Good nutrition for kids. Startling, though. You don't feed them much milk, do you?
I'm not a big fan of milk or cheese
Or meat.
or eggs or cows.
You just want them to grow up healthy and
I'm a
strong.
big fan of cows. I just don't think we ought to eat a lot of them, that's all. Children grow better when you feed them the best food. In lieu of antibiotics, just feed your child well through the illness, and
prevent
they'll
the
get
problems.
better. Yes.
Okay, we've got this parent who doesn't want to keep running to the emergency room and spending $150 in the emergency room, but doesn't want the child to get too sick. So how does the parent distinguish a child that's going to get well, if left well enough alone, given a little symptomatic medication, versus the one that may go into a pneumonia or meningitis or other serious problem that really does need a doctor's attention and antibiotics and the whole works?
One thing I can tell you is very, very young children in the first 2 or 3 months of life need a different kind of attention. Their symptoms are more subtle. They tend to get sicker quicker. But as kids get older, they get a little more obvious. A parent who knows his or her child well can tell the difference. A high fever makes a kid look awfully sick. So you bring the fever down. A long lukewarm tub bath will do that. Tylenol type medications will do that. And what you see when you bring the temp from 105 down to 101 is that it was a big fever, not a big illness. The same thing applies to changing scenery. If a child is cooped up inside, nothing makes us feel worse than sitting inside in our robe and slippers and hanging around the house all day. Get your child out of the house, try to do some playing, see how many smiles you can get. That will help you distinguish a larger illness from a smaller illness.
A kid that's really sick just doesn't want to play, doesn't show interest in things. So,
No.
the parent that knows the child ought to be able to tell them.
Right.
And of course, they're going to want to err on the side of getting a little medical attention, and probably should unless they're confident.
Most illnesses can be handled on the phone. If you have a decent relationship with your doctor, a phone call is going to do you as much good as an office visit with almost all wintertime illnesses.
That's great. And Wayne, we have a question from
We do have a question, John and Jay.
Dr. Gordon, I was just wondering, what's the main difference between breast milk and the cow's milk?
Well,
Is there any
I don't
difference, Jay?
think the main difference again is one is meant to grow a cow, which is an animal dependent upon a certain set of amino acids, a certain set of nutrients.
Grows to 600 pounds.
Very rapid maturation, relatively short life, a very different set of proteins. And the other is meant to grow a human being, very slow maturing process, usually doesn't grow to much more than 150 or 200 pounds, much longer lifespan. And the protein, as John was alluding to earlier, the protein is very offensive. And the fat is a completely different kind of fat, and the carbohydrate's completely different. And then there are anti-infectious agents which beat antibiotics hands down in human milk. And in cow's milk, you don't necessarily find them. What you find in cow's milk is a pretty serious amount of antibiotics and other chemicals that are not good for people.
And you got it, breast is best. Let's go to the phones. Caller, you have a question for us?
Yes, hi. I have a daughter who is almost 3 years old, and she's generally been in pretty good health, but what kind of diet do you recommend for me to keep her in good health?
The best possible diet you can imagine. Fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, lots of pasta, lots of beans, some tofu cooked with great creativity. I don't recommend giving kids chicken or fish or beef. These foods, if these foods were ever good, they're not any good anymore. They're too polluted. Again, the protein's not right, and our digestive systems are meant to have a plant-based diet.
Does that shock you, caller?
Well, no, actually, my daughter's very finicky, and it's hard to, she won't eat tofu. And vegetables, I have to, bribe her to get her to eat them.
Don't bribe her anymore. All you have to do, your job is not to be the chef de cuisine, preparing 8 wonderful entrees each meal. Your job is to say, here's some healthy food. Eat it or don't eat it. We'll sit with you and eat it. But children don't starve themselves. Children who are offered good food will eat it eventually. You just have to be patient.
And thank you for calling.
Thank you.
I remember when my kids were young, they liked simple starches. They liked, in fact, they liked plain foods. You couldn't mix one food with another. They liked very simple things. And I remember when I was a kid, I had a very tough time chewing beef. And I would come to my mother and say, I can't chew this. And she said, well, Johnny, you gotta eat this. And what she should say is, of course, Johnny, you can't chew it because you have the wrong set of teeth. You don't have teeth like your cat. Of course, you spit it out. She didn't say that.
No, your mother didn't say that.
She didn't say. She should have said that. And Wayne, we have a
Yes,
question
John
from the
and
audience.
Jay, we have another question here.
If you're taking antibiotics, are there any types of food that would cause bad side effects?
Any types of food?
With antibiotics.
Yes, because your intestinal bacteria, along with killing the bad bacteria in your sinuses or in your ears, you also kill off a lot of the good, or perhaps all of the good bacteria. So your intestines can stop working well. A diet that's higher in protein or higher in fat is going to be really difficult. If you have to take antibiotics, and there's no doubt some people have to take them, keep the diet really simple. Really simple. Again, fresh fruits and vegetables and some pasta, which is a wonderful child's or adult's diet. They don't complain much.
And the main thing, of course, is to keep the kids healthy. And would you join me in saying that dairy product consumption is one of the most misguided messages that parents have?
Oh, it's a terribly misguided message. It's based strictly on economic considerations. If we stopped eating cheese or stopped drinking milk, we would have millions of cows in America without unemployed cows.
Yeah.
Unemployed cows could
That'd
get
be
mean,
terrible.
and we could have a lot of trouble.
But we'd also end up with a lot less asthma.
we'd have a lot fewer illnesses, we'd have healthier people, there'd be less colon cancer and so on. There'd be less need for antibiotics.
Right. But you know, a few pediatricians have come to this conclusion, even though the scientific literature is very clear that kids suffer greatly because of the consumption of dairy and also other aspects of the rich American diet. You know, kids have problems of obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, constipation problems, and yet, even though the literature is clear, somehow it doesn't seem to get from the scientific studies to the practicing pediatrician.
Again, you're swimming upstream when it comes to the economics involved. There's a tremendous amount of money made selling beef and selling cow's milk and so on. And we're going to have all these, again, all these animals unemployed, and we're going to have economic disruption. It would be to the benefit of the American people and to the American children if we changed our diets and got away from dairy, but it's real slow to happen. You know, Dr. Frank Oski, who's the chairman of the Department of Pediatrics at Johns Hopkins, is one of the most prestigious pediatricians in the world, and for the past 20 years has been writing articles about the problems with milk.
Well, let's talk more about the problems of milk when we come back. With me is Dr. Jay Gordon, and we'll be right back.
Learn English at home. Just say hello.
Once you figure out how to speak your kids' language, well, you don't really have to say much at all. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Welcome back. We're with Dr. Jay Gordon, and I think we kind of shocked our audience.
I don't want to shock anybody
for a pediatrician to say that we should be more careful with antibiotics and that dairy products are a cause of a lot of our kids' suffering is, I'm sure, radical for many of them.
I don't think that cows should drink human milk either. Now
that's really radical.
No, but seriously, it is very traditional to eat the way we have eaten. But if you think about what cheese really is, or where cow's milk is really meant to go, you're probably going to either drink less of it or drink none at all. And in terms of antibiotics, it's a very unnatural intervention.
But you and I both have to admit it's done a lot of good for a lot of people under the right circumstances.
Antibiotics, when properly used, are fine. Antibiotics are not usually properly used.
Dr. Gordon, you always stimulate us tremendously. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being with us.
Please join us next time.